Hello everyone and welcome back. If you are new to this channel, welcome. My husband and I purchased property in Cochise County after living van life for a couple years and decided to settle down. And in this video, we're going to talk about some of the structures we looked into for the owner builder opt-out program in Cochise. What are the types of structures that we looked at? And so one of the biggest ones that we looked at for many years was Earthships, and we were mesmerized by these. A lot of folks love the creativity of these. Mike Reynolds is very well known for his very sustainable earth type structures built out in the northern part of New Mexico. And so that was one that we actually looked into. Unfortunately, the manpower part of it is very difficult as it involves a lot of pounding of dirt into tires in order to create that kind of back barrier to help with the passive heating and cooling process. And so we knew that we just didn't not have enough time to be able to pound that much dirt into that many tires to create that. Another structure that possibly could go hand in hand with that is tire bale structure. And so this takes the concept of Earthships, however, it fills that mass back portion or berm part of the house with tire bales instead of the individual tire stacking process. And while that's a wonderful idea for us, it's hard to find somebody who can actually transport tire bales and also where you can find those at. But we have known many couples back in Ohio who have actually built these types of structures. The next biggest one, which has gained a lot of traction out in southeastern Arizona, is the Hyper Adobe build. And so you may know Tiny Shiny Home in their current builds, as they have a property and have been doing many Hyper Adobe structures on there for quite a few years now. But essentially it is just stacking these red type UV protected bags on top of each other vertically just to create your structure. And while it's a wonderful process, we've seen it firsthand in action and actually helped them out with one of their little workshops. It is unfortunately very time consuming and labor intensive as well. And so Paul and I looked at it and said, wow, this is great. It's very cost effective. It's not labor effective for just the two of us. And so we decided to possibly revisit that for smaller structures, but for our main living dwelling, we're going to pass this time. The other thing we looked into was a shed conversion process, and this is very popular actually out in southeastern Arizona. A lot of folks will go out, purchase a shed just from one of those, places along the roadways and highways that sell sheds, have it delivered, and then they just try to fit out the inside like a typical sticks and bricks home. We thought about this, but thought that essentially it wouldn't be very energy effective, even though it might be cost effective. We just weren't really crazy about the idea, and so we decided to go ahead and pursue something else. Something that is extremely traditional and has been around for thousands of years is Adobe Brick. And while we are in the primary area outside of maybe New Mexico for building a lot of the Adobe structures, unfortunately it is also a very labor intensive process. You have to get the said materials and then also have to create those bricks. And those bricks have to dry, so that would take some time as well. But overall, we loved the concept of Adobe bricks. We just feel like it would take us quite a while in order to create as many bricks as we would need for our structure. So with that, we moved on to something else. Which brings us to what we did decide to go with, and that is straw bale. And so I know a lot of folks out there are probably like, what in the world is straw bale? And haven't you ever read the story of the Three Little Pigs? And yes, but there's a lot of great qualities about straw bale building, and I want to share that with you. And so a lot of the reasons, we looked into straw building, and it just seemed like it'd be a great fit for Paul and I. And these are some of the reasons why. First one is longevity, and while it has not had as much longevity as, say, an Adobe Brick building, which has been around for thousands of years, straw bale building actually originated back in the early 1900s here in the United States, and beyond that there was a lot of buildings over in the UK that utilized straw bale within the structure. And so back in the early days of the Homestead Acts and things like that, a lot of folks who were coming out west needed to establish a homestead, and very quickly. And one of the ways they devised to do that was either by sod houses, kind of similar to what Laura Ingalls Wilder lived in, or there was the newer concept of straw bales. So once the hay season was done, and you had the leftover straw, they would bale those up, and essentially they looked at it and said, hey, we can build a house with this. It's essentially like bricks. And so that's what they did. And so the longevity, it's been there for a while. It was kind of brought back by Athena and Bill Steen, and they were able to revitalize a lot of those building practices back in the 60s, 70s. I've wrote many, many books on it and worked with many of the folks even over in the UK on establishing some of those building practices. So it's making a comeback. The other reason we wanted to do this was low manpower. As I've talked before, a lot of the other processes I've laid out, or the other building types I've laid out, require a lot of manpower in order to create these things. It's either very labor intensive and very difficult things to build. And so one of the things that we had to look into is that it's just Paul and I building this thing. I don't have a ton of friends out here. I don't have family members out here. While we do have groups in the area who are willing to help, you can't stretch those people. You've got to use those for specific projects at the time. And so anyways, we knew it was just Paul and I doing this. And so that's one of the things we had to consider with straw bales. There's been documented process here on YouTube. If you've seen Upside to Downsizing, they've built plenty of structures with straw bale as well as their own home. And it's just the two of them. And so that's something Paul and I had to consider. And that's another reason why we wanted to go with straw bale, is that it can be done quickly and with two people. The other aspect that I wanted to consider is creative building. And so while yes, if you have a sticks and bricks house, you can paint it, you might be able to add some ornamental trim here and there, add a porch on, things like that. I like the idea with earthen buildings that with that clay base on the outside of it, you can transform it into something else. You can get creative with sculpting. You can make it your own vision. And I really, as a creative mind, really enjoyed that thought. And so that also interests me about the straw bale process. So the next point is low building cost. And so originally, I would say when straw bales started coming back on the scene, straw bales were way much cheaper. Even a few years ago, before a lot of the inflation hit, you could get straw bales for, between $3 to $7 a bale. Out in southeastern Arizona, those prices have skyrocketed. So those have gone up exponentially into the $10 to $12 range per 3-string bale. I say that, but however, there are areas in the surrounding states where you can still get those cheaper prices, $6 to $7 from what I've seen. So it's not, impossible. It might just involve some logistics. But aside from that, the outer coating is typically a clay plaster, which kind of seals the straw bales in. And so that also is very cheap because we can take that from our own land and create our own plaster mixes, which I think is a huge benefit to seal everything in. And so that's also why we looked into this, was cost effectiveness. The biggest thing, if you go and look around at any other YouTubers that talk about straw bale building, is the insulation and thermal qualities of a straw bale home. And that was one thing Paul and I wanted to consider with an earthen type of structure, is that we wanted something that could be passively heated, passively cooled fairly easily. We wanted something that could retain heat, retain the cool temps on the inside without a lot of effort. And we didn't want to be running a huge central air conditioning unit, and dealing with that whole mess. So while we will have probably a split unit or two in there, we will have backup processes for heating and cooling. We wanted to find a structure that their primary heating and cooling was passive. And so that is where the straw bale comes in. The insulation quality is amazing. The R value, unfortunately, I don't have it offhand, but it's really great at retaining heat, retaining coolness within those buildings. And that's something that we considered. With straw bale, how you build it is you stack your straw bales. There's a clay plaster that goes, around that to coat and set it in. Well, yes, a typical straw bale sitting out in the wide open with nothing to protect it is going to catch fire very easily. If it is put into an environment where there is no oxygen able to reach it, then at that point it makes it hard, if not impossible, for flames to be able to be created in that environment. If you think about, maybe back to your science classes, fire needs oxygen in order to combust and to continue to grow. And by putting that clay plaster on the outside of it, on the top edges, you are essentially smothering those straw bales so that no oxygen can get in there to create fire or hazardous condition like that. And so that is why we also considered straw bales, is because of the fire resistant qualities. Earthquake resistance as well. There's been quite a few studies on earthquakes with these different types of earthen structures, and the straw bale building was able to pass with flying colors when put through a lot of these simulations. Well, that's not a huge concern where I'm at in southeastern Arizona. It's good to know maybe for folks who are planning on building in the maybe California coast or different areas that are prone to a lot of earthquakes. Final reason I want to talk about is that straw bales were not a hard concept for me to grasp. As a creative mind, I don't do well analytically with a lot of numbers and things of that sort. And so math is a very hard concept for me in some cases. I can take basic measurements, things like that. But when you start getting very complicated into a lot of construction processes and things, that's where I tend to just, you know, not comprehend very well. But one thing I did comprehend after watching a lot of folks building, after watching, you know, attending workshops, is that straw bales are not a difficult concept. It is no difficult to me than someone building hyper Adobe or somebody building maybe possibly with Adobe Bricks. And so it was a concept that I could understand pretty easily, as well as Paul could understand it as well. And so after attending the workshop, we felt even more comfortable with it. It's quite funny, actually. We attended our workshop out at the Canelo Project, which I will bring you along shortly here to explain everything. But anyways, you know, Bill and Athena sat everybody down in their living room and was like, why do you want to do this? You know, what's so interesting to you about straw bale building? And my answer was essentially, it's an easy concept. It doesn't seem difficult. And so he's like, oh, what do you mean it's not difficult? And I said, think about it though. If you are, if you're building an Earthship, you know, it takes a lot of labor and manpower to do that. With straw bale, you can have a house up within a day or two, depending on the size. And so that's things that, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, a lot of people there for other different qualities. They just wanted to know about the process. Some of them were earth building types contractors who may have been working on projects with clients. But for most part, you know, here I am with my answer of, yeah, this doesn't look that hard. And honestly, guys, I don't think it's going to be that difficult. I think we will have some nuances, but I think overall it's an easy concept to grasp and it's an easy way to build. And I'm surprised it hasn't really gained a lot of traction. But anyways, those are some things I wanted to talk about, the types of structures we looked at and why we decided on going with straw bale. And so the other half of this video is going to be about the workshop that I attended. So please enjoy and thanks for watching. We made our way out bright and early towards the Canelo Project to get to our weekend workshop on straw bale building. I did want to mention really quick that this is the intellectual property of Bill and Athena Steen. I did not feel right loading all of the details and content of that workshop. If you're interested, you can definitely take a look on their website and see if you can also attend a workshop for yourself. I will, however, give kind of just a basic general overview of what we learned and some of those steps and processes. The first one was learning how to knot and tie a lot of these bales, whether it meant splitting the straw bales for different sizes or also tying the bales together in the corners. This was a very unique concept, different from putting rebar in the bales and other strapping methods that have been used in the past. This next process here is Athena showing the purpose of the top plate of the structure and how it will compress down the bales once everything is set into place. You can see the helper there in the back is putting that all thread through the top plate, and which will reach down to the foundation. Later on, you'll see how those will be tightened down to then compress the straw bales onto the structure. This is a blank slate of a foundation before we got to work and replaced all that with a bunch of straw bales. This is Athena showing how to get those threads through the straw bales in order to tie those corners together. It was amazing just to walk around the property and get to view all of these very unique structures that had been built over the many years that they've called this place home. This place used repurposed jugs as windows, which was pretty cool. And this greenhouse is absolutely amazing. We were here, I think, around March or April, and look how vibrant it is in here. I was just in awe and absolutely amazed. The back was built in Adobe Brick. And also earth bags as well. And it was so warm in here, guys. It was really awesome. Like, I went away with a lot of inspiration from just this particular structure, if not from the other straw bale structures on site. But there was plenty of beautiful plastering and things that you could just look and remark at as you walked around their property. The next day of the workshop was focusing on things like the door and window bucking, and also focusing on placement of those top plates so that we could compress everything down. This is them actually lifting the top plates on top of the structure and getting ready to kind of cinch everything down. You will notice those rods on the side of the structure. Those are also there for added support as well. Here is Bill checking the leveling and making sure that everything is kind of square and plumb before they begin the drilling process. After that, we learned a little bit about the plastering techniques that Athena and her team are very well known for. Here she was preparing some slip that will go initially on the straw bales at first. Essentially, the slip, it coats the outside of the straw bale in order to allow the more thicker plasters to adhere much better. This was one of the base coat that she created, and then here is where she is applying that initial slip on there so that it coats the straw bale and that the next base plasters will be able to adhere to those straw bales much better. And this here is Athena applying that next base layer coat, and then you would just build upon your layers from there depending on the types of mixtures you want to do or the final finishes you want on the outside. But with that, that concluded our quick workshop, and we were headed back to the homestead. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate your support and helping us almost reach 500 followers. I can't believe we're saying that, so thank you so much. And we will see you next time, my friends. Take care.